Constitutional Conversations is a series of discussions by America's leading scholars about the principles, framing, ratification, and implementation of constitutional government in the United States. This series is hosted by the James Madison Memorial Fellowship Foundation of Alexandria, Virginia.
James Madison's constitutional consistency, his theoretical consistency or philosophical consistency, is primarily a question of whether he changed from the period in the 1780s when he was thought to be a strong nationalist and modest Republican to the period of the 1790s in which he was thought to be less strongly nationalist but far more strongly Republican. But that's an oversimplification, it seems to me. When Madison began his educational career at the College of New Jersey, now Princeton, he imbibed several strains of theoretical interest, one of which was a strong commitment to republicanism, to be sure, but perhaps still more importantly was a strong commitment to religious liberty. He was influenced by the Scottish Enlightenment, by his mentor Witherspoon and others. And in the course of developing his ideas, he entered into a political career in a certain way, seeking to realize the promise of those ideas he had acquired. He began them in association largely with Thomas Jefferson, and as they pursued the Virginia statement of constitutional principles, the Declaration of Rights in Virginia. One of the interesting things that emerged was his commitment to defeating the word toleration in reference to religious liberty, because he argued it is not to be a matter of toleration that people are free in their conscience. It is a right in and of itself. Well, that commitment comes forward in 1785 by the time he is challenging in the Virginia legislature through his memorial and remonstrance a proposal to impose an assessment, a tax really, on citizens in Virginia to support religious establishments. And he thought this was inappropriate. And he argues against it in such a way as to establish what I think is an overlooked expression of his theoretical principles, the ones that subsequently will be developed in his essays for the Federalists, in his arguments in the Constitutional Convention, and in his politics of the 1790s. In other words, I'm suggesting I don't think there's a problem of inconsistency in James Madison. There is a phenomenon of changing political circumstances calling forth rearticulations, re-expressions of political principles and adapting them to particular contexts. But I don't think there's a problem of inconsistency. I think he was, in fact, consistent. And we see this certainly late in his life when he recurs to questions of constitutional interpretation. And he has created a defensible posture for arguing what constitutes a legitimate foundation for constitutional interpretation. Madison had opposed in 1791 the proposal for a Bank of the United States as unconstitutional. By the time he leaves the presidency in 1817, he has approved the Bank of the United States, the second Bank of the United States. And that's one of the things people point to that suggest he was inconsistent. He argues he wasn't inconsistent. He argues he was wrong in 1791, and he was demonstrated wrong by the subsequent history, and therefore he embraces what had been established by those who ratified the Constitution and those who were engaged in the deliberations about it as the definitive view of what the true understanding of the Constitution was. So I think Madison we should think of as someone who thought through issues with the underlying commitment to republicanism and especially religious liberty as the foundation, and therefore was consistent throughout in his political theory.
Constitutional Conversations is made possible by a generous grant from the Fairleigh Dickinson Jr. Foundation. Constitutional Conversations is made possible by the James Madison Education Fund.